Been 8 years since I moved to LA, and one of my favorite questions to ask people is how did they land in LA? So today I'm going to share my story of how I landed in the City of Angels. So 8 years ago, let me backtrack to 9 years ago. I went to school at Minneapolis College of Art and Design. Go there, hated it, terrible experience. Anyways, I went to school in Minneapolis at College of Art and Design, and I studied entrepreneurial studies, and as part of the program, I had to complete 4 internships to graduate, and my last internship was done at BCBG Max Azria. Getting that internship is a whole story of its own, but basically I landed this unpaid internship in the fashion industry. I moved out to LA for the internship. I had a roommate, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. It was so fun. I met amazing people, no regrets, and it was my first time in LA ever. And then I completed that internship and I moved back to Minneapolis. I graduated college and I moved back home for about 6 months. And my boss from that internship reached out to me and she was like, hey, like we have a job opening for a marketing coordinator. Do you want to move here? I was like, oh my gosh, of course. I was looking for jobs at the moment and I was very narrow-minded, and I was like, I want to move to New York. I really hadn't thought about moving to LA, but obviously when you're 21 you can't really be that much of a chooser. LA, and she was like, okay, can you be here in 2 weeks? And I was like, oh, absolutely. I could definitely not be there in 2 weeks, but I learned how to drive in LA. I don't know how I got a license. I literally begged the man to give me a license because I told him I needed to move to LA. Moved to LA. I started my job in the fashion industry at BCBG, and I was a marketing coordinator, and 9 months into the job, I got laid off. Of course, I was so young. I was 21, 22, and they laid me off, and they laid me off twice. I always leave this part out, but basically they did layoffs because they were being bought out. They filed for bankruptcy, and then they were being bought out. And I got laid off, and then I remember someone came to me and they were like, oh my gosh, is your name Ana Sofia? And I was like, yes. I was sitting at my desk and they were like, oh, we want to talk to you. And then they called me into this office and they're like, well, actually, you're an integral part of the team, and we really want to offer your position moving forward now that the company's going to be bought out. We really need you. And I was like, that's great, but I'm just a marketing coordinator. Do they really need me? Am I really keeping this business alive? I doubt it because I filed for bankruptcy. They were like, no, yeah, we didn't mean to lay you off. And I was like, oh, okay. And I remember in my head, I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't have to tell my parents that I got laid off. This is such great news. I felt so relieved. I can pay rent. I can pay my car. And then at the end of the meeting, they were like, oh my gosh, what's your full name? And I was like, oh, it's Ana Sofia Gomez. And they were like, oh no, we just rehired the wrong person. And I was like, they're like, you actually are fired. And I was like, or you are being let go. And I was like, okay. So I just went to a turmoil of emotions twice. So I basically got laid off twice. After that, I took myself home and it was time to find a job. I remember that when I first told everyone that I had gotten laid off, they're like, oh my gosh, are you moving back? I'm from McAllen, Texas, so I grew up in McAllen, Texas. They were like, are you moving back home? And I was like, no, I'm gonna figure it out, guys. I'm not just gonna be didn't work out, bye. And I did, kind of. I started my own business because that's a story for a different day, but I got funding from Bumble Business, and I founded my own bikini brand. I worked on that for 9 months. I started getting small contracts here and there doing social media management for brands and agencies, and then I got rehired at BCBG. I went back to BCBG and I was part-time and I was doing social influencers for 3 of their brands. And then I got reached out from an agency for a full-time opportunity. So I went to go do that. And I was there for a year and a half, and then I got recruited by an agency. So I went to the agency and I took that full-time opportunity. I loved it there. I was there for about a year and a half as well. And then they reached out to me. The same person that hired me from the internship reached out to me for a job at Estee Lauder. So then I went over to Estee Lauder. I worked for Smashbox Cosmetics for about 3 years and a half, 3 years and 8 months. And I recently got laid off 2 months ago. And I'm currently looking for a job, but also doing content creation and my TikTok. So feel free to support me. But yeah, that's the journey of how I made it to LA and how I have stayed in LA, because I think that one thing is getting to LA, and then the second hardest part is staying in LA. And I also just want to highlight that like I literally didn't know a single soul in California, like not even in like a 600-mile radius. I didn't know anybody. I started from freaking scratch. I didn't even know how to drive, and 8 years later I absolutely love it here, and I'm still fighting to stay in the city, employed or unemployed. And I don't know where I will be in the next 6 months or a year, but the city so much, and it keeps me feeling alive, and it was worth every freaking struggle, because in between all of those jobs and the whole story, I struggled more than I thrived many times. I love hearing stories about how people move to LA or what has kept people in LA, so feel free to share in the comments.